Welcome to Operation Freedom, cable TV show, sponsored by Freedom Museum, VFW Post 7589, and Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 617. Each month we interview a veteran and have him tell his or her story. I'm your host, Bradshaw. We're pleased to have with us today Colonel Desi Arness, retired of the U.S. Air Force. Desi graduated from the University of Colorado in 1961 with a major in biophysics and Secretary of Education, a dual degree. He chose to be a computer engineer, so his first school was at Shepherd Air Force Base, graduating as a certified USAF computer systems engineer. And then you came in Strategic Air Command. Tell us about CAC as your first assignment.
Well, that was a pretty interesting assignment for me. I was assigned as a nuclear weapons targeter, a nuclear weapons officer, and probably one of the new whiz kids that had understood how to do computer programming,
right.
Fix them, do whatever. But perhaps the most interesting thing that happened to me there was the first Cuban crisis. This is when the Kennedy boys decided they were going to support the invasion of Cuba, which failed. And shortly thereafter we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, if you recall that.
Yes.
And I can tell you, well, the interesting thing about that is that because I'm Cuban, they came down to me and said, well, you target Cuba. And that was an interesting thing because at the time, we only had what we call the big bangers, 23 megatons, 4 megatons.
Powerful weapons.
Powerful weapons. I mean, huge weapons. And, about 2 or 3 times I had to go up to the 4-star and tell them, I don't know what we're going to do because every time I can either air burst them or ground burst them, whatever, it's going to kill many, many, many Americans. So the upshot of it was we had to decline most of the targets at SAC, and TAC took them because they had the low-yield weapons.
Right.
And we just had the big bangers that would take out the missile sites, and I mean take them out.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about it at the time is that I had to move the family. Most did, because we were absolutely certain this was the.
It was it.
It was it.
Well,
and as you know, we had at the time, and most Americans don't know this. We were at Cox.
Oh yeah.
Which means, as you know, all we're waiting for is the president to unlock the football and punch the go codes.
Yeah.
Because at the time we had 50% of our air forces in airborne alert.
Yes.
And all the missiles were loaded and ready to be fired. Yeah. And I'm telling you, at that particular time, it would have been just sheer devastation for the Soviet Union.
Right.
This was not good for them. They got the message.
Yeah.
And
I'm very aware of it because I was on tanker alert. I was on tankers. I was out hunting that day, got pulled off the hunting field, and 3 hours later head to Harmon Air Force Base. Right. And it lasted, we were on alert 30 days.
That's it.
That was a long time to be cocked.
A long time.
That was amazing.
I can tell you, I spent in the underground, I never got out of the underground for 8 days. Now, can you imagine wearing a uniform and being down in the end? No showers, no nothing.
No sleeping facilities.
No sleeping facilities. We slept on our desks and did all our stuff.
And you were SAC
there.
headquarters.
SAC headquarters in the underground.
Right.
Which, by the way, I recently showed my wife where that was located. And that's the way we stood until they start bringing the force down again, standing us down.
That was a crucial time early in your career. Now, you got your first overseas assignment after this over in '65. Went to Wiesbaden.
That's it.
That was electronics.
Yep. Well, we did some pretty interesting things at the time. As you know, they had what was called, they don't have it anymore, but the Berlin corridors.
Yep.
And the name of the game was to try to, and you could also, believe it or not, you could drive on very specific roads, and you could train into Berlin. And at the time, I was fluent German, so we did some things over there very interesting. I suppose I could talk about one of them that really came to fruition on the second tour. I'll talk about it in the second tour.
Okay, second tour German. Okay. Good. I'm just going along. And by the way, how many languages you speak? English, German,
and Spanish.
And Spanish. So 3 multilingual.
Yeah.
Geez, that's great. So yeah, that was the middle of the Cold War, and it got pretty hot sometime.
Right.
Now, you could have stayed longer because you didn't do your full 4 years. You volunteered for Vietnam combat.
That's correct.
Uh-huh. And
Yeah,
you
I
were
did.
there in 67, 68 in the 7th Air Force in Saigon, where headquarters of 7th Air Force was, of
That's
course.
correct.
Tell us about that one.
Well, it was interesting. I fortunately I wrapped up my European assignment and got a master's degree from the University of Southern Cal,
Right.
and went over to. I thought it was going to be kind of an easy tour. I must tell you that, for Air Force,
Right.
not necessarily for our dear Marines and our Army
Right.
folks. They were
Sure.
really suffering pretty bad. But as soon as I got in country, my boss, who was H.P. Smith, said, you really know this airborne reconnaissance stuff and electronics and things like that. Why don't you go up and help the Army out and fly those Broncos and show them how to do airborne electronics and things like that? And I said, man, that sounds great to me.
Uh-huh.
So I went up to a place called Weifu Bai, which was right up in Route Pac 1, as you know, just maybe 30 miles from the border.
Okay.
And I remember my first mission in the Bronco. I took off, and the North Vietnamese opened up on us with a 50 caliber machine gun, and I said, "What have I gotten myself into?" And we took off on that mission, and we went up to. The mission was to go ahead and do a SLAR run over Route Pac 1 and Route Pac 2, and got shot out 4 times with
Good
SA-2s. So I said, holy Hannah, this could be
4 times in one mission now.
4 times in one mission. We
Good
took
grief.
we took the shot. Fortunately, they have the little indicators on there.
Right.
And the Bronco can turn on a dime. I
Yeah.
mean, you just peel it over and drop out of it.
That's for
Two
the
goes-
advance. That was they couldn't lock on. They could break a lock and they
They
couldn't
break a
couldn't
lock in a
react.
heartbeat.
Yeah. That was amazing.
So, those things were really designed for high-speed airplanes.
Yeah.
And the Bronco really could.
You were low level too. What altitude you fly? You
Well,
said 50
6,000.
caliber. You heavy low.
Well, we were low on takeoff, but
Uh-huh.
we were flying the mission at about between 6,000 and 10,000 feet.
It's still low to me. I like
Yeah,
it higher.
that's So, and then we flew some electronic photo missions over Laos and on the trail
Right.
and so forth and so on. Did a lot of work up there, and that worked out pretty well because the Army Aviation, for instance, had to report to 7th Air Force and the MAC-V. That's the only reason I got involved.
Oh, okay.
So
So that was
went-
an operational command for anything flying.
anything flying.
Okay. Good. Now, in the Air Force wanted to get you back as a well, blue suit, so you sent you to Nakam Phanom. That was an interesting
That's
assignment.
it. Yeah, I come back to 7th Air Force and had did some work there on computers, and they said, "Now wait a minute, we got a guy here who is an IBM certified engineer, blah 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 blah, and he knows all this stuff, and we're putting this the sensor walls
Right.
in up in North Vietnam and on the trail,
Uh-huh.
on the Ho Chi Minh Trail." And I said, "Can you go up there and help them from the airborne and processing, data flow and telecommunications and so forth and so on?" So I said, "Sure, why not?" And went up there, and it was frontier. That's all I
Frontier,
really. Well,
yeah.
you know that. You were at Naked.
I was
Family.
right.
And it was frontier up there. It was a great group of guys. The A1s were up there. As you know, the Special Forces really sortied out of there and
Yeah.
did their thing going into
Penetration
North
team.
Vietnam and so
Yeah.
forth and so on. But the missions that I went up there and I flew Cricket. I flew on the sensor droppers and
RF-4s.
on the RFs.
Right.
And flew on. They had some beach airplanes that were really the controls. They would be the radio relay and the sensor relays that would bring the information back to Nakhon Phanom, where
Okay.
we'd read it out and do things with it and send it on back
Yeah.
down to 7.
Tell where Nakam Phanom, we also call it NKP.
NKP
And then
Naked
one more
Fanny.
name we had, Naked
Naked
Fanny. Explain where that is.
Well, it's right on the Mekong, and it was almost right on the borderline between North and South Vietnam. And that's what made it interesting because it was rich with North Vietnamese trying to traverse down from North Vietnam.
Yep.
coming into South Vietnam. In the An Khe Valley, as a matter of fact, was a big entry point.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the kind of fun I had there.
Oh, yeah, and you were a very interesting mission, the Task Force Alpha. Tell them about Task Force Alpha. We can talk about it now.
Well, that was the processing center for all the sensors, and what would happen is, it would be very, very funny. I'll tell you one very interesting incident that I don't think's ever been disclosed, but I used to have this on a recording, as a matter of fact. But GIs are GIs everywhere. I don't care who they are, or who you're fighting, or what they're fighting. But a group of North Vietnamese, maybe a small-sized squad on one of the audio sensors. Now, you remember we had electronic sensors,
right.
We had audio sensors. and they came upon the audio sensor. Well, what are we going to do with this? Now that and they're talking to each other. Right? What are we going to do with the sensor we found? And one guy says, well, we'll bring it back to the commander, and he'll give us a prize and send us back home. And another guy pops up and says, well, wait a minute. Suppose they don't do that. Suppose the commander says, what were you doing out here, and what's this all about? They absolutely talked themselves right out of it and said, no good is going to come of this. Just leave that damn thing alone and let's get the hell out of here.
So they stayed there and did his work.
And everybody at Naked Fanny is listening to this. Of course, it's being simultaneously translated from Vietnamese by us.
That's great.
They were saying, oh my God, they're all the same no matter where they are. Let's just let this thing alone. Let's do anything about it.
Yeah. So you were there, what, 12 or 13 months?
13 months.
13 months. You have what's your perspective today looking back on the war? Would you like to express some
Well,
views
I was
on
over
that?
there during Tet, and the Tet Offensive in 1968, which occurred in February, as you know, 1st of February. And the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong had made a decision that they would come out in the open and confront U.S. forces in the open. As you remember, before then it was mostly jungle and tunnel warfare and things like that.
Right.
Guerrilla warfare. And they decided, no more guerrilla warfare. We're going to come out and we're going to beat the bejesus out of the Americans. That didn't happen. Instead, what happened is the Viet Cong were destroyed. There were no more Viet Cong.
Jeez.
They were all destroyed. Every unit was destroyed. And most of the North Vietnamese army was destroyed eventually after about these. And the fact of the matter is that all of us young folks over there, and I know this because later on when I went to Command and Staff, or Naval War College, we were all senior officers, we knew what was happening. We could have truly walked into Hanoi and taken over North Vietnam.
But we didn't know it at the time, right? Or did we know it?
Yeah, we knew it.
Ooh.
And so did the general. Westmoreland knew it, that we could do that. But they had spent their political capital. There were too many soldiers, Marines, sailors, and airmen that were killed during Tet.
Okay.
And the American public gave up on us, kind of maybe like they're doing right now, gave up on us and quit. But that war was over. And all us Vietnam vets still talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
In emails and things like that we had that thing cold turkey.
Right. And explain to the listener Viet Cong and North Vietnam.
Well, the Viet Cong were the communist agents of South Vietnam.
Southerners.
They called themselves Viet Cong. The NVA were regular soldiers of the North Vietnamese who happened to be a communist-run country. But they were really regulars. They were a regular army under General Giap.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, and anything else you want to tell us about it? Now thinking about it, we talk about it all the time, of course.
No, except that one of the reasons for the Vietnam Veterans Association is, as you know, when we came back from Vietnam, we were treated as baby killers and many other nasty words.
Right.
Nobody greeted us at the airport. Some terrible things happened at the airport, as you know. Many soldiers, sailors, and Marines were spat upon and other things. Just one story that I really would like to share for the record. There was a place called Haight-Ashbury. I don't know whether you remember that, where all the hippies were located. And
Hippie Enclave.
Hippie Enclave, right. Well, when I got back, and I took the spit and the showers and the curses and everything. But I put on my uniform. We came back through in the San Francisco area.
Right.
Almost everybody did, but not all, but most everybody did. But I went up to Haight-Ashbury. I was in uniform. And I sat there on the corner with all the hippies. They'd come over every once in a while and ask me, well, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm here because I want to find out whether this was all worthwhile. I said, I'm telling you, it is.
Uh-huh.
It is worthwhile because I said, you know, if I didn't do what I did, you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
That makes me happy. And I got up and left.
Yeah.
That's my story about
Good
Vietnam.
Yeah. So you left your Vietnam War assignment, and we could spend a whole hour on that, some other story, but we'll go to, you were assigned to the Pentagon as a captain, which is tough for a captain because of the economy and everything. You made major below the zone, assigned to Air Command Staff. Tell us about that.
Went down, somehow that happened, and I got assigned down to Command and Staff College, went down to Maxwell, met a bunch of wonderful guys. And
that's like graduate school for the Air Force also.
Well, it's for, mid-range officers, and that was very, very good. Usually you get your choice of assignment out of there. I did not. I did not get a choice of assignment. I got sent back over to Europe.
They still
they still wanted me back because there's some unfinished business there, and of course I still had some fluency in German and knew and understood the area over there. So back I went to Germany.
And targeting electronics.
Right.
Okay. And then I got from Germany. That's 2 tours in Germany. That's pretty. A lot of people like Germany.
I got to tell you about my German story.
Oh yeah.
One
go ahead.
German story.
Okay.
What we managed to do, and it's been many, many, many years now, but was able to put a tap on their radar system. Now, they never knew that when I was up at Borfink and so forth, that we had a direct. We were seeing everything that their air defense system was seeing.
That's great.
Faster than they were seeing it on the other side.
Jeez.
And because I had fluent Russian people with me and myself and German, we could understand everything. And, you know, we were also able to help them out a little bit.
Right.
And add some flavor to things when
you could insert stuff?
Oh, absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, help them out a little bit.
Yeah.
Not too much, but a little bit so that they didn't get suspicious of anything. But
yeah.
Once in a while we put an extra airplane on there for them, and sometimes we would move where our planes are.
Scramble their brains a little bit.
Scramble their brains. See if they understood and could deal with it, and so forth and so on.
Neat.
So that was pretty neat.
Yeah. Well, that's a very beneficial assignment. Two times. You were sent to the from there. That you were sent to Naval War College and below zone promotion lieutenant colonel. That's
correct.
Good. Now, what's a nice guy in the Air Force getting sent to the Navy? How did that ever happen?
I have no clue how that happened. That was beyond me. It is the toughest academic college, still is. You go there and you are going to get a master's degree, whether you like it or not. And it is a pass-fail institution, unlike the other.
That's right, the only one that gave grades.
The only one that gave grades, and it's a pass-fail. And if you failed, you were out. They'd throw you out of the college. The other senior schools were not pass-fail.
Right.
So that was pretty. Anyway, I got out of there as a distinguished graduate, so I felt pretty good about that. Now, the reason I got out of there as a distinguished graduate, I think, besides I wrote a paper that went down pretty well, and that was how the Soviet Union was going to be defeated economically because of Reagan's Star Wars program.
Right.
And at the time, I proved it
and
mathematically.
You put it in writing.
I proved it in writing mathematically that it would happen, but it didn't until, well after.
Later.
Much later.
Yeah.
But the second thing that happened at the War College is I wrote a paper on how to use AWACS and electronics, long-range electronics and things like that to assist the Navy in the conduct of air operations. And that did come to pass, and we used that.
Good.
They used that quite effectively, in Desert Storm, and I'm assuming they're probably using it now.
Yeah, and you had a superb leader there, Vice Admiral James Stockdale. He was a
Absolutely.
POW, a Medal of Honor recipient.
Medal of Honor recipient. Absolutely, probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met, and the nicest person you could ever meet.
I've read his books and his writings, and I was very impressed. Intellectual and
absolutely. I mean, a real
superb.
mentor.
Yeah.
And that's
Great.
really what he was to all of us, was a mentor.
Every one of you.
Every one of us, not
Great.
just me, but every one.
How big was your class? Just
We
one-year
were
class.
about 175 total.
That's for the year. You were
For the year.
175 all stuck together the whole
Yeah.
year.
But of that, 45 of them were other services.
Okay.
Coast Guard, Merchant Marine, blah, blah, blah. And of the remaining balance, about 40% of that were foreign students.
So we were educated. Okay.
Yeah, we're educating the people.
Right. Well, I remember in
maybe
other
having
schools.
troubles with
That's right. They do in other schools. I remember that.
Yeah,
Yes.
foreign
Okay.
officers.
That was good. So you
In fact,
had
I'll
a
tell you an
great school.
interesting story about that.
Sure.
Because in our class we had two very senior Saudi officers who I managed to buddy up with. And later on I was deployed over there, if you look in my list, when I was down at TAC.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the two guys, when I went over and got deployed, was deployed big time to support Saudi Arabia when Iraq was fighting Iran.
Right.
But these guys told me what this was all about. And, when you establish a good, close buddy relationship, you can find out things that
Sure.
a normal person really can't find out. And that was the discord between the Sunnis and the Shia. And, all the Saudis are Sunnis.
Yeah.
And they are just absolutely petrified of Iran taking over that area.
Right.
And they would talk to me about, you guys got to be here. You cannot let this happen. And they went on and on and on about that. We're so glad you're here. Blah blah blah. But I don't think that's changed. I think that's probably still true.
They're killing each other in Iraq now, and that's it's really something. You came out of there, and your first time was back to as intelligence officer back to John, and you by that time you were a bird colonel and 17 years in service.
That's correct.
That's great. Tell me about that.
Well, I was director of intelligence. One interesting event that occurred then, that I've talked to my wife about it from time to time, is I happened to be on duty when the Israelis struck the nuclear plant at.
Oh yeah, I read
in
a book
Iraq.
on that. Yes.
And they did that with F-16s, and that was quite a strike, and they absolutely, totally destroyed Saddam's nuclear capability. And everybody, I had to go over to the president and over to the staff and show them, exactly how they did this, how the weapons went off, why we, the Air Force, believe that such destruction took place.
Uh-huh.
Did we really know what we were talking about, and is it
Yeah.
really destroyed?
Yeah.
And of course, it turned out to be absolutely correct. It was really
yeah.
destroyed.
Yeah.
So that was my highlight of
Yeah.
that.
I read a great
tour.
book on it, and I remember they put a lieutenant on it. Like he'd been flying for about 6 months. It's an amazing story about how successful, didn't lose a single pilot,
Not a
everything
single pilot.
right on it.
Right on target.
Yeah. Yeah. I spent some time over there. I was always impressed with the Israelis and their military.
Exactly.
Your final assignment was to tackle air command, so they didn't sit you back in SAC again. You got an attack. That's a good flavor. That's the other great command at the time.
there's an interesting story about how I got to TAC. My boss over in Germany twice was a guy named Bill Creech.
Remember the
And they
name?
named a nice air base after him. He was a powerful person and a heck of a good mentor. But the one thing that I guess I'd like to share with you about my tour in TAC, besides being the most wonderful assignment that I had, and Grenada. We did Grenada while I was there.
Good.
If we have enough time, I'll talk a little bit about that. But the things came over and told me, he said, now, I want you to get into this program. I'd already had one polygraph, but it was essential that you have a full polygraph and full top secret and all that sort of business. And I was sent out to work on the F-117, which at the time was just absolutely top secret.
Yeah.
And the name of the game there was, how are we going to integrate all of this great stuff that we're collecting into the airplane itself, so that the pilots, when they're going on this alone mission, and I mean alone, because there wasn't anybody going to go with them and help them out, but they could help themselves out because they would have access to everything that we knew en route. And that's the kind of thing that I worked on. What do we got,
3
minutes. So that was very exciting.
Oh,
Getting that program off the air and getting it going. And I knew that would be a great airplane. I think the other thing was Grenada, and I'd like to spend just a minute talking because, as you know,
you end up being in Grenada or operating near it.
Yeah, in the AWACS.
AWACS, okay.
Right. And the interesting thing
Airborne,
about that,
tell them what that AWACS means.
Airborne Warning and Control System.
Right,
It had a big, huge radar on top of it, and we were up over the Caribbean, and I was up there with a fellow by the name of General Reed, and he saw all these targets out there, and he said, "Well, we had a time. By the way, we had free fire over the Caribbean. That means anything moving, we could shoot at."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, what are all those things there?" And I said, "They're druggies." He said, "Well, can't we shoot at them?" And I said, "No, they're not the enemy. At least at the moment, they're not the enemy." But we had all this stuff, and of course AWACS records it. So when I came back, I wrote my after-action report, and I said, we saw maybe a couple of 300 druggies moving in and out of and into Havana.
And these are small aircraft. You pick these small aircraft.
Oh yeah, you can see them without a problem. And then all of a sudden, I got a call from the DEA saying, "Really?" And they wanted to interview me about that. And that's kind of how I wrapped up my career.
Good. Well, you had a highly successful, I think we could have done double the time on that you retired, say, in 85 after 25 years. And your first civilian job was with Boeing Computer Service.
That's correct.
As a computer systems requirements engineer. And then you found your own company. VASA was right here in Prince William. Tell us a little about that, find your own company. That's terrific.
Well, it was a thing to do, so I wanted to get back doing what I did, believe it or not, as a lieutenant and a captain. And that's what I decided to do, and been happy doing it ever since.
Good. And you and your wife, she works closely with you on it.
Absolutely.
Right. You're president of the company, and she's vice president. Is that it?
Yeah.
Or she president, you vice president?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. And it's located, the title is VASA. What's VASA mean, by the way?
Virginia Systems Incorporated.
And you're located right in Manassas?
Right in Manassas, on Mathis Avenue.
Mathis Avenue.
Right.
Okay. And you founded a company in the 90s?
90s, yep.
So you've been going for almost 8 years now?
18 years now.
Okay.
Loving every
my
minute.
math is bad.
Loving every minute.
Okay. Great. Colonel Desi Arnaz, America thanks for your service to the country. Thank you for being today. Fascinating. I think we'll have to do a follow-up interview a little later. This is your host, Brad Bradshaw. I want to thank Colonel Arnaz for being with us today, and now Mr. Arnaz and his wife is sitting in the audience. And to our audience, thank you wherever you are. This is Brad Bradshaw. Thank you. Good night.